And we welcome you to D2EastHoops.org, the 2016-2017 Northeast 10 Conference Men's Basketball Season Preview, alongside Chris Granozio and Steve Zerdelian. I'm Tim McCaffrey. Don Familo pushing the buttons all around over there. We start in the Northeast Division of the Northeast 10 Conference, where Jay Lawson, last season's Coach of the Year, in his 26th year, had a 21-9 overall record last season.
Going to be hard to match that 21 wins this year, as they have graduated an amazing trio of Tyler McFarland, Keegan Highland, and Alex Furness that amassed over 5,000 points the last 4 years. They averaged 57 points a game last season, almost 20 rebounds a game, and almost 9 assists. And they do have some key returners, but overall, that is a lot of big shoes to fill.
It's been a nice run over the last couple of years for the Falcons, but now it's time to regenerate. There are some players, as you mentioned, Chris, that do have some experience in the rotation. Ferguson Duke and Matt Barr in the backcourt should be leaders. I like Brandon Wheeler as a versatile swingman up front, and freshmen Ryan Richmond and Kyle Bouchard played well last year. These players are all going to have to take more prominent roles for the Falcons to even approach the 20-win plateau this season, but that's kind of how it goes when you lose players of the caliber that they're losing. You're bound to take at least a half a step backwards as you try to forge a new identity.
The Northeast Division of the Northeast 10 had 4 of the region's 9 20-win teams last season. One of those teams at 23-8. St. A's squad that went through a lot of turmoil off the court last year, with a possible move to Division 3, then a possible move back, then a possible stay, a possible move back. They've settled in the Northeast 10 Conference this year, and it looks like they're here to stay. Yeah,
Division 2 is going to be their future, as it has been a tremendous past for Keith Dixon and his squad. Keith Dixon is in his 31st year. He'll be the elder statesman of the D2 men's basketball coaches, and he lost a couple of key guys in Mike McGahee and Victor Joshua, but he's got quite a few important pieces back, including their point guard, who was Rookie of the Year last year.
Yeah, Tim Gears had a terrific season last year, and he epitomizes St. Anselm. This is a program that's always going to compete, and they have a good conveyor belt of talent. They have a nice way of having underclassmen at the very least contribute and then grow into larger roles. And I'm looking at players like Harrison Taggart, who was one of the best three-point shooters in the country last year. Chris Braley, Cody Ball, and Grant Mackay, also experienced players who can, at least for stretches, carry a team. So with the divisional switch issue past them, and now they can look forward with a lot of positive vibes. I think the Hawks are going to be one of the better teams in the region.
Speaking of positive vibes, 2016's East Regional Championship squad was Chris Krause's Stonehill Skyhawks, a 24-9 record last season. They tied for second in the Northeast Division, but they rolled through to the Elite Eight. They lose a lot, and they return a lot.
Yeah, among the losses, Carter Smith, who had a sensational regional tournament last year. Pierce Cumstone as well, a versatile big man up front. And Adam Bramante, who had a nice season from beyond the three-point arc and inside it as well. But lots of good players back for the Skyhawks, Chris, led by Ryan Logan, one of the more versatile players in the region.
Yeah, he was the only player in the conference last year that was in the top 10 in scoring, rebounding, and assists, and a very versatile big man who can score inside and out. He makes everybody else better, and Joel Baroa, Isaiah Bess, and Jimmy Walsh will be 3 guys that return. For Jimmy Walsh, he was limited to 9 games last year due to injury, so his coming back is going to be a very welcome addition for the club. And so they do have pieces coming back, and I think for Chris Krause, a team that his Stonehill team knocked off St. A's in an overtime game last year for the regional championship, as it was an all NE10 affair, got back to the Elite Eight, and he remains, Chris Krause, the only man and actually the only person to make it to the Elite Eight as a player, an assistant coach, and a head coach in Northeast 10 Conference history.
Southern New Hampshire University last year seated 8th in the NCAA East region, arguably the best 8 seed in the country, and they defeated the first-seeded Holy Family Tigers, in the NCAA tournament. Southern New Hampshire ranked number 20 in the NABC poll. Stan Spiro, in his 32nd year, the dean of NE10 coaches.
Yeah, and he took that team last year as an 8 seed. They became the first 8 ever to beat a number 1 in the regional tournament, and also they were the defending regional champs, so they kind of had an idea. They were rolling at the end of last season as they were the previous March. They lose Rodney Sanders, who was the best three-point shooter in the country last year, over 52% from long range. B.J. Cardarelli, also an important player that they lose, who was an anchor for those last two great teams for the Penmen. But they bring back a lot.
Chris Walters, Devin Gilligan, and Daquan Andrews among the players coming back for Southern New Hampshire. One thing, Chris, that I really like about this team is the fact that they use their experience to their benefit. It's worth noting last year when they finished the regular season, they were fourth in the Northeast 10 Conference. Every game for them was a win or go home. They ended up winning the Northeast 10 Championship on the road against Bentley. Then they had a terrific regional tournament as well. Came up short, but I loved how players like Cardarelli and Sanders led the troops. They had been there before. They understood what it took to win, and they've passed that on to their returnees.
This program has a great pedigree, and you got a good steady point guard in Adrian Oliveira also, and a very important addition in Dimitri Flores, transfer guard from Quinnipiac, who they expect big things from.
In some years, 16-12 is not a good record, but for Franklin Pierce, 16-12 got them fifth in the Northeast Division last year. David Chadbourne's club expects to be quite better than that, only losing 13 points a game from last year's team.
I like what Franklin Pierce has back. Dante Gittins and Matt Banton, among others. Mike McDavitt up front. Asante Sandiford as well coming back for the Ravens. You're looking at a division here that had four teams win 20 games, the four we'd mentioned prior to Franklin Pierce. But the Ravens are pretty well positioned to get better from last year and maybe leapfrog a couple of those teams ahead of them because of some graduation losses.
David Chadbourne, who took his Ravens 4 years ago to the Elite Eight and has had some solid teams ever since. 18th year on the men's side, and he knows what it takes to mold a champion, and he's got the pieces here that he could be in line for another run at it. They lose just a couple of players from the backcourt in Tyler Icone and Jacob Jocko, who combined to average just about 13 points a game last year. So a lot of points coming back, a lot of experience, and yeah, Steve, I agree with you. This is a team that could make a big move forward.
Thanks for clicking on and staying with us on the Northeast 10 men's basketball season preview right here on D2EastHoops.org. It's strange. Merrimack, new coach, Joe Gallo, Bert Hamill court, no Bert Hamill. It's going to be a weird feel at Merrimack this season.
Well, every year that the Northeast 10 has existed, way back in the early days of the early 80s when they were the NE7 and then the NE8, Bert Hamill has been a steady fixture at the NE10. He's been a coach there. He was there for 36 straight years, but for the first time in 37 years, he will not be the head coach. It is not going to be the same walking into the Volpe Center and not seeing him there. His name will be on the court, but Joey Gallo, one of his proteges, will be stepping in to take the place of the beloved NE10 coaching legend. He'll be presiding over a team that loses quite a bit to graduation in Jelvis Solano, Troy Hamill, J.T. Strickland, and James Kennedy, a quartet that combined for over 5,000 points the last 4 years. They averaged last year alone almost 60 points a game, 24.5 rebounds, and 12 assists. That's a lot to try to make up for.
Well, it's a start-over situation in a lot of ways for Merrimack with Gallo taking over. Actually, that might be beneficial to him. There's no expectations in terms of having a lot of experienced players back, but he does have some guys who are in the rotation. Anthony Barry and Kyle Howes, Jordan Thornton as well. Ryan Bolter showed a lot of promise last year, and they've got some good freshmen coming in. So it's going to be a group effort to kind of build from a position of not having expectations on them this year.
Josh Meyer, St. Michael's Purple Knights squad, has a key returner in Matt Bonds, the nation's number 2 rebounder, number 1 on the offensive end.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite players to watch in this league, and it's always great when maybe your hardest worker is your best player. He's a double-double guy. You know what you're going to get out of him. And the key for St. Michael's is to surround him with players that can support him, especially perimeter shooters.
Yeah, Coach Meyer is hoping that Levi Holmes III, Zaire Williams, Colin Ritchie, and Winston Jones II will continue to improve as they really made some solid contributions last year to a team that was 5-16 in league play, but again, they were playing in that powerhouse division. They were competitive in most of those games. They weren't blown out of too many of them. They just didn't have quite the depth of the other teams like the Bentleys and the Stonehills and the St. A's. So look for St. Michael's to try to kind of move up the ladder this year as they lose a couple of key guys in Greg Grippo and Morel Gaskins, but they certainly have enough coming back that they could be really fighting for a playoff spot this year.
Assumption, losers of 12 straight last season to finish the year, lost a lot Lost 6 players coming into this season. The key additions, a few, but this is a team that it needs an uphill trend.
Yeah, Declan Sukup is the top returning player. He was a good scoring guard, a tough player. Also, Justin Tuxson, Marcus Murray, and Carl Ziegler, the last 2 there that I mentioned, are returning after sitting out last season due to injury, and they'll be welcomed back with open arms, as 2 years ago they averaged over 22 points a game between them. And so they'll be really important to kind of help Assumption back, along with a notable addition in Damian Rance, a transfer forward from Division I San Francisco State. So these are guys that really will try to help Assumption kind of regroup and get back to where they are normally very formidable.
Head coach Mike Harding had a team that relied largely on the three-point shot last year. If they can get a little more balance offensively and integrate some of the newer players into the mix, I think they could find an identity, but it's going to be tough to make up territory in what's traditionally a very difficult division.
You are listening to D2EastHoops.org alongside Steve Zerdelian and Chris Granozio, Don Familo on the controls. I'm Tim McCaffrey. Well, that was the Northeast Division of the NE10, now to the Southwest Division, and Southern Connecticut State had a good season last year. It ended on a really down note, a first-round loss into the NCAA East Regional 2 stack, but they expect more of the same in Southern Connecticut.
Yeah, a stunner of a loss for the Owls last year as they lost on a buzzer beater by Chaz Watler of the St. Thomas Aquinas Spartans, and that kind of pretty much shortchanged Southern Connecticut for what they thought was going to be another run to the Elite Eight as they went 2 years ago. But under first-year coach Scott Burrell and the former UConn star, they still had a very, very strong year at 22-8. They were a powerful up and down the court kind of offensive juggernaut. They are number 4 in the preseason NABC poll this year, and they do bring back quite a lot, including Michael Mallory, the NE10 scoring leader, Austin Carter, Isaiah McLeod, Joey Wallace. This is a team that still should be very formidable, at least on paper.
If you like seeing points scored, go see a Southern Connecticut game because you know you're going to see offense. In particular, Mallory is just a whirling dervish, and he's really a fun watch out there. But Southern Connecticut is going to have to get over the sour taste at the end of last season. There was, of course, an incident after the St. Thomas Aquinas tournament game that's been well documented. It did leave a stain on the season, and they're going to have to get over that quickly and move forward. They may not be quite as powerful as last year, but they're still going to be very good in terms of scoring the ball.
They do lose the player of the year in the conference, graduating senior Desmond Williams, and also fellow senior Stephon Williams, no relation, and they'll have to make up for those losses, but they certainly have plenty still in the cabinet.
The Northeast 10 is a league that punishes youth, and a couple of years ago the Panthers were punished for having a lot of youth, but they've got just about everybody back this season.
Yeah, Delphi is a team that I think could really improve that 20-win total from last year and even get it pushed toward about 25 because they have a pretty healthy non-league schedule of teams that they should be able to beat. And that, plus if they continue to do very well in the conference, I think they could really have the sky being the limit this year. And one of the main reasons why is not only do they bring back quite a bit, they also gain one of the best players from the now defunct school Dowling, Chris Millender, who was a double-double machine last year, the number 5 rebounder in the country and tied for second in the nation in double-doubles. He joins them. That gives them an offensive threat inside as well as all that great three-point shooting last year.
Yeah, the balance that Millender adds to this offense is really important because it puts players in different roles where they belong. Manny Suarez, quote, a big man, is more of a perimeter player than Millender is, and now we can play more of a natural position, and that just helps the dominoes fall into place for Adelphi. This is a team with experience, with good depth, with good coaching, and they are really in line to have an excellent season here.
David Duke, the head coach in his third year about to start, he loses Anthony LaBroya and Ryan DiNicola, a couple of really solid players the last 4 years, but he does bring back Michael Coffey, Tavon Ginyard, Connor McGinnis, Jack Laffey, a very good balanced perimeter, and I think that plus Millender makes this a team to watch this year in the NE10.
Brian Brewery, in his 31st season at the helm of St. Rose, didn't lose anybody. So does that mean that he'll improve upon the 13-14 record of a year ago?
I think they will. There's a lot of talent here, in particular Tyler Sayer, who's one of the smoothest scorers in the region, the lefty, great mid-range shooter, and pretty good in the paint as well. You know what you're going to get from him. It's the other players, Chris, that surround Sayer. that will define how this team ends up doing in the long run.
Yeah, they really need a secondary scorer. Other than Sayre, no one else averaged in double figures scoring for them last year. They did have some injury problems as Chris Dorgler missed the whole year, and he's a key piece that will be coming back for his fifth-year senior season. Also, guys like Jack Jones were hampered by injuries, got a late start to the season, and never quite got into the full rhythm that made him the Rookie of the Year 2 years ago. Other guys like Julian Lipinski had very solid games. Damon Coleman, Michael Ryan Boyd, Sam Ekstrom, Farrell Gordon, Max Weaver's back. So they pretty much lose nobody, bring back a lot of experience, some health, and I think Brian Bury's team, the Golden Knights, could get back to prominence pretty quickly.
Another team that doesn't lose a lot of scoring, Lemoyne Dolphins. They finished tied for fourth in the Southwest Division last year, but key returners and a couple notable additions might key a good season for the Dolphins.
Yeah, a couple more transfers from Gannon University, which seems to be a pipeline for Lemoyne lately. Isaiah Eisendorf, a very, very powerful player inside with a nice touch, can hit threes as well. Also, you got a guard in CJ Asuncion Bird from New England originally and back into the region, and he is a very, very good scorer, especially from the perimeter. They also bring back Russell Sangster, Stan Busick, Tanner Hyland, Dan Kegler, and if they get Taekwon Roland back at some point this year, the lefty is a very versatile player who's great on the offensive end and is also a pretty good defensive player too. This could be a very, very good club for a very good Lemoyne team that needs to make a step forward. Also, Tyree Chambers, we shouldn't forget about, a transfer guard from Providence. Patrick Beeline's got some weapons to work with.
You're locked into D2EastHoops.org. We're continuing along with the Southwest Division of the Northeast 10 Conference. In Andy Burkholder's 2 years at the helm of American International College, the Yellow Jackets have been feast or famine. Number 1 seed 2 years ago in the East region. Last season, they barely snuck into the NE10 Conference tournament. Feast or famine this year for the Yellow Jackets, Steve?
It's hard to say, really. They've got some key returners coming back. Juwan Moody, among others, but they lost a number of proven players, in particular Cameron Dobbs and Tremere Burrell. So I'm not sure where AIC is going to go this year. The Yellow Jackets are going to have to figure out who they are and where their strengths are if they're going to have a chance of climbing the ladder.
Dobbs had a bit of a disappointing season, I think, by anyone's standards last year. Burrell is a big loss for them. Nolan Woodward and Oscar Assier were also key players for them. But, yeah, you mentioned Moody's back, also Bruce Spruill, Rasheed Howard, and also Javon Pitts-Young gives them a solid nucleus to build upon. But I think Andy Burkholder certainly has some work to do to make this team rise in the standings, especially in a much improved Southwest Division. But I think with a lot of the tale is going to be told by a lot of the newcomers, and there are going to be some transfers and some freshmen joining the ranks, and how they all gel will be a key to their success.
6 in the Southwest Division a year ago. The Pace Setters are improved with only 2 losses this season. Can Pace sneak into the NE10 conference playoff mix?
Well, you say 2 losses, meaning players. Shelton McKell and Kyle Pearson are 2 seniors that are gone, but they have some top returners in Ryan Peterson, Brian Rivers, Victor Giacino, Austin Mofanyana, and also Mike DeMello, who was limited to just 2 games last year, but coming back this year is going to be key to them, because I think that was really a shot to this club last year that really didn't have a whole lot of depth. And in Matt Healing's first season at the helm, he was pretty much forced to play players a lot of minutes that didn't really come through for him and didn't have a whole lot of experience. So I think this year's team is going to be a lot more fortified and better equipped to prevail in the rigors of the NE10.
If the pieces fit together for the Setters, this could be a dark horse kind of a team. They've got some new players, a trio of 6'7" freshmen, along with Christian White, a graduate student who was a walk-on last year at Syracuse. And if they can buff up the offense, the Setters could be a very interesting watch.
New Haven. Ted Hoteling's squad was a shell of itself last season. Injuries, all sorts of things going on off the floor. But he kept it together last year. Had a pretty competitive team towards the end of the year. They finished 8-18. But we mentioned earlier, this is a league that punishes youth. And Hoteling will have 7 freshmen.
Yeah, it's very difficult to prosper in circumstances like that. And they lose a couple of good players. And Jamal Mosley, Samir McDaniels, and Josh Gudemi. But there's something to work with here for New Haven. I'm just not sure, Chris, that it's going to be able to come together, given the inexperience, to really make an impact, they could actually be a better team with a similar record.
Yeah, Michael Burke is probably the key focal point for them. Also, Tommy Hunt, Najee Larcher, who is a very intriguing young big man. I think could be an important role player for them and could step into a more of a leadership role. Also, a notable addition is Danny Upchurch, a transfer guard from Charleston Southern, who is somebody to watch for. I think the Chargers certainly, as you say, could improve, but will it be enough with a lot of other teams improving around them?
Okay, guys, moment of truth time. Traditionally, the NE10 is a 4-5 bid league. Who makes it to the NCAA tournament this year, and who's left wanting?
That's tough. I think right now your favorites probably on paper have to be Franklin Pierce and Southern New Hampshire. On the northeast side, maybe Stonehill gets back there as the defending regional champ. And on the southwest side, I think Southern Connecticut and Adelphi on paper are clearly the favorites, and maybe a team like a Lemoyne steps up. St. Rose certainly could be on the periphery of making it as well.
That's 9 teams, Chris. Come on, you're like Dick Vitale. Everybody can't get in.
Just giving you the options of
Steve, pare it down a little bit for us.
And yet you forgot St. Anselm in
of
that
course,
list.
And
yeah.
Bentley.
So it will be a very interesting year. The NE10 had 6 20-win teams a year ago. I'd be shocked if they didn't do that again.
Okay, I say Franklin Pierce, Southern New Hampshire, and St. A's. And how about an upset team, Chris? Give me the team that's going to surprise in this league this year.
I say Assumption. They have a lot to make up for, and I like Mike Harding's style, and I like his recruiting, and I think if any team can really improve this year and double and possibly triple their win total, I think Assumption could surprise.
Well, we thank you so much for joining us. That wraps up our Northeast 10 Men's Basketball 2016-2017 season preview right here on D2EastHoops.org. For Steve Zerdelian and Chris Granozio. Don Familo, I'm Tim McCaffrey. Thank you so much for joining us here once again on D2.